friends. It's Everything Mayor. We're back. We are back. Lots of JM news. And we're going to do some speculating today. Just not aimless speculating. I've got some evidence that John himself put on his Instagram. It was on a story, so it was only there for a limited time. But one of you sleuths out there discovered this, and I think it's worth talking about. And it's probably going to tell us a little bit about his new album and who might be working on it with him. So before we get to that, though, as always, thank you for your support. If you are a member, if you want to join the channel for additional content, please do that. It is a great way to support the show. If not, like, subscribe, all the normal YouTube stuff. Before we get to the speculating about John's new album, how would you like him to play at your wedding? Because we saw him play another private event in the last couple days here. I'm sure if you're paying attention on Instagram, you've seen this. Now, it might seem crazy that someone like John Mayer would play a wedding or a private event, but here's the thing. As someone who does a lot of private events, obviously at a completely different level, people are not hiring me because of who I am. They're hiring me because they need someone to play guitar and sing and play songs that they like. I will tell you that it's not surprising, to me at least, that John Mayer, Dave Matthews, all of these big acts still consider and will entertain the idea of doing a private event, even something like someone's wedding. I will admit, seeing someone like John Mayer playing at a wedding is a little bit, it's confusing, because it's like, yes, obviously these people had enough to pay that fee, which is sizable. Let me just tell you, there's lots of speculation online as to how much that costs, and it is multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. And here's the thing, to be honest with you, as it should be, because John Mayer doesn't need to do those things. Certainly it's not a need-based thing. So I would actually be curious to know what his thought process is with doing that. Is it only friends of friends? Does there need to be some personal or business connection to make that happen? Or is it purely like, hey, if you have the fee, here's how much it costs, I will come and play at your event? There are definite requirements, though, and I can tell you, because I was just kind of eagle-eyeing some of the footage and pictures. John Mayer's not going to show up and just use the wedding band's gear. So there are very specific requirements, and you can see it when these big acts go places. I mean, Rolling Stones do this as well. Now, the Rolling Stones will literally show up and set up in your backyard, I guess, if it's big enough. But that's the key. It's got to be big enough, because they're not going to just come and play on any rinky-dink stage. They're going to they have a rider, which is just a sheet, that doesn't just require brown M&Ms or orange M&Ms. It's got every technical requirement for them to do their show the proper way, and that is a huge part of the cost as well. And I would imagine that is in addition to the artist fee. As well as travel and other expenses, would be my guess. It's not just simply all-inclusive, because there are a lot of things that these artists bring with them. Namely, for John at this wedding, I'm seeing a specific floor monitor setup, his even down to his blue chip expensive guitar picks. There's one right here that I have. They are $35 a piece. Camera's not going to focus on it. Doesn't matter. But that's all there. And the mic that he uses in those situations, like it's all there. And I'm sure there's something. It's probably not Chad Franskowiak, who is his main front of house engineer at live concerts. It's probably one of his proteges or someone local to the event that they trust with this, because it is a big responsibility to be on a crew, as small as it might be for just a wedding, for an artist like John Mayer, because we live in a time where everyone is going to film it, and the people are paying a lot of money, so they want it to sound good. And you want John Mayer or whoever the big artist is to be comfortable with their performance, because when they're comfortable on stage, then you get a better performance. And that goes for people like me, who are just lowly musicians who work and try to make it work. It's the same thing. So we just don't get to make as many demands Although that's not true. That's not true. I do have certain requirements. They're very minimal usually. Again, as they should be. So let's get into maybe. Well, actually, before we do that, just a quick mention of John Mayer's love for baseball this week. As a Detroit-based podcast, I don't know if I've ever told you that on here before, but I am in the Metro Detroit area. We had a similar experience with the Detroit Tigers, unexpectedly just going crazy in the Major League Baseball playoffs, and it's been cool to see. It's always fun to see John Mayer post things outside of his normal interests that we all hear about. Like, it's pretty obvious now that he likes watches. It's not surprising. It's fun though when you get to dig into other interests that he has, and baseball is clearly one of them. And I thought it was kind of cool that he related the New York Mets playoff run to his time when he injured his finger, and the inspiration that he got from players on that team to then say, all right, well, how do I overcome this adversity? And in his case, it was an injured left index finger, if I remember correctly. So, quick mention of the baseball thing because I think it's kind of fun. On to the main point of the show today. And I need a sip of water before we go into this. Okay, so I am lucky to have lots of you who are very, very dedicated to the Mayer universe because it's a lot to keep up on. Even, and I can't, I have never done this show when he's been, I've done it when he was on the solo tour. That's a little bit different animal, but for an album tour cycle, I'm going to need your help like this because there's going to be tons of stuff out there that I'm probably going to miss. So feel free to message me when you either on my own Instagram or the show's Instagram. So whenever you find stuff, and a good friend of the show, Miles, who I will have to say is, I'll give him a decent amount of credit for this show even existing because he was an OG watcher, listener of a lot of the Mayer content on my main YouTube channel. And at some point in the past, he said, you should do a mainly John Mayer thing. Why mix it in? Make it just a thing. And so credit to you, sir. But also credit to you for just absolutely sleuthing this John Mayer Instagram story. Now, let's go over it for a second here. And those of you who are just listening to this and you're not watching this, obviously, I will do my best to dictate what we are looking at, but obviously a visual aid is going to be the main part of this here. So what would appear to be just a birthday message to someone named Blake Slatkin actually holds, I think, some very interesting secrets in plain sight. So those of you who are looking at this here, just says, happy birthday, Blake Slatkin. Adore you. Enjoy your special day. That's kind of Mayer's thing, is when he's wishing someone a happy birthday, says, enjoy your special day. Now, I'm zooming in here. Great shoes, John. Great watch. Got the AP on, one of the many that he owns. But if you scroll down over here, we see these paddles. And these paddles generally are reserved, those of you who have children, like a first day of school type thing. So let's go over here. This is John's paddle, and there are some things written on this paddle. This says, my first day of my new album. I am 46 3/4, I think it says, old. So this gives us a date range. We know this is a current picture, and Mayer's birthday just passed here in October, and he just turned 47. So this is right before his birthday. Let's see. My favorite lunch, I guess my favorite subject maybe, that is lunch. My teacher is Blake. And I want to be Spotify #1 when I grow up. That's what it says. So some jokey type things in there. But what I find interesting, we are definitely talking about a new album. We are referencing the other person in this picture, Blake. We have the correct date and time frame. And then he wants to be number one on Spotify. So we'll come back to that in just a second. Now, if we scroll over, though, Blake also has a chalkboard, and it says, "My first day of John's new album." It gives his age, which is correct. "My favorite class, physical education, PE. My teacher is John, and I want to be," he writes a smiley face. Now, who is Blake? Is he just someone who John happened to be hanging out with? No. I will read from Blake's Wikipedia page now. Blake Slatkin, born October 16th, 1997, his birthday also just passed, is an American record producer and songwriter. He has produced songs for high-profile music industry artists, including Justin Bieber, Lil Nas X, Lizzo, The Kid Laroi, Sam Smith, and SZA. Do you pronounce it SZA? SZA? Someone correct me. Someone help me. I am old and out of touch. That's what happens. Slatkin has produced 7 Billboard Hot 100 Top 10 singles, 4 of which peaked at number 1. I'm going to let you sit with that for just a second. Blake is a record producer. How's that feel? Silence on a podcast. Okay. So we can make some assumptions here. He's not just hanging out with Blake because it's his birthday. I think both of their paddles reference a new record, John's new record, which, if you watched a previous show, I'm not going to say I told you so, but thanks again to another one of you out there who sent me some information, some photos. We saw pictures of John in Henson Studios before he made it public, about a week before he made it public, that he was working on a new record. So we start to add things up here. It says my first day of John's new record. That might be part of the joke. But what I think the main thing to focus on here is, I think it's a good chance Blake is producing this new record. Now, when you look at the producers of previous records, it's interesting. Don has produced Born and Raised, Paradise Valley, and Sob Rock. The other records, more recently, I think, I want to say self-produced along with Steve Jordan from like Continuum, Battle Studies, and The Search for Everything. I'm pretty sure were some combination of self-produced, Steve Jordan, and I think Chad Franskowiak, second Chad mentioned today on the show, who's also his in-studio engineer as well as his front-of-house engineer on tour, gets a production credit on one of those records. So what we've moved towards of late is basically the same crew producing the records. Now, a producer, for those of you who are not familiar, it can mean a lot of different things. So when you have a producer like Rick Rubin, for example, Rick Rubin famously or infamously, depending on your opinion, doesn't have any real involvement with the recording technology that goes into making a record. It's not to say he can't. It's just not his style. His style is like vibes. You know, famously putting Anthony Kiedis from the Red Hot Chili Peppers in a haunted bedroom to record a vocal. Things like that, kind of off the wall things that, quite frankly, normal musicians like myself, like I can't afford to have just someone come in and like put me in a vibe. I need someone who knows how to get a great guitar tone, knows how to get a great vocal tone, and will then recommend and suggest and mold parts of a song and arrangements and a song in general into what it needs to be, which is generally what most producers are doing. They are doing things from finding the right personnel to play in a record, like, hey, I think Aaron Sterling would be great on drums for this, down to, I want to hear this type of a drum sound, I want to hear this type of a guitar sound, you should record a vocal like this. Sometimes they cross over into the songwriting realm. It gets a little bit blurry with that line, especially these days, as to who's producing, who's writing, and it's kind of all happening at the same time. And then there's an executive production role too that you could be, where you're kind of just overseeing and helping steer the direction of a project. So it's very collaborative. I will tell you, John is one of the few artists who really showed up at the game with a producer ability and a producer mind. Room for Squares, all those guitar parts and all those songs were basically arranged and produced when they went to record them. If you listen to Inside Wants Out and some of the bootlegs and demos that are out there, you can hear all of the parts are there. Normally what would happen is you would have an artist like John Mayer, and this is not to take away from anybody like, Jack Johnson or Jason Mraz or any of those other singer-songwriters that kind of came up at the same time. But most of those artists would show up with a song, sometimes fully formed, sometimes not fully formed. And then a producer is who's going to come in and say, hey, it'd be really great is if we had this type of a guitar sound on it. It'd be really great if this was, I know you're playing that on the guitar, but what if we tried it on the piano with an organ and that type of thing. Mayer really brings to the table fully formed, fully fleshed out, and fully produced and arranged ideas, which is rare for an artist of any era, not just now, really any era, to be honest. So what does it mean, though, for the music if we are speculating correctly that Blake Slatkin is going to be the producer of studio record number 9? What does it mean? Certainly, I think it means that we're going to be getting a more pop-focused album. And I remember when The Search for Everything came out, John Mayer kind of billed it as his return to pop music, which that came out of the Born and Raised era, the Paradise Valley era. So I get that. But I will say The Search for Everything, I think, was everything Mayer is. And that's why if you see my album rankings, especially the more recent one, it's on top for me because it contains, in my opinion, everything that Mayer has done as an artist. Just all on one album. It's got the Continuum vibe. It's got the Room for Squares acoustic guitar driven vibe. It's got some songs that have that Born and Raised vibe, and then it's got some new, more soulful kind of groovy type things on it as well, which maybe are the more poppy things. And then certainly Sob Rock in a lot of ways does that as well, but it obviously is more of a theme record with an 80s yacht rock pop kind of vibe. So I would be interested to know how this, assuming we're correct, how this is going to affect the music. So we've seen John do the song with Zedd, arguably very pop, yes, EDM-ish music. He has played on a bunch of records, to include a clip that just came out I saw it right before recording the show. So I don't have it prepared here, but you can go find it. It's John playing on Alessia Cara's, Clara or Cara? You would think I would know this by now. You know who I'm talking about. Let's see. We'll consult the internet. Alessia Cara. That's right. No L. We talked about this previously on the show that he's going to be appearing on her new record on a song. And there's a clip of him in the studio playing on what I presume to be the song that he will be on. So very pop also. Is that where we're going? And if it is, how do you feel about it? Now, Mayer going pop is not going to be like an absence of the great guitar playing that we all know and love. It's going to be the treatment of the song in general. And you saw that with Sob Rock. There were certain treatments, and what I mean by treatments are choices made by what instruments to use, what drum tones to use, what guitar tones to use, production style to use. There are a lot of those songs that could have been done in very different ways. Last Train Home, for example, started as an acoustic ballad kind of thing. We heard the acoustic version, which is generally kind of how we understand that song originated, but then you give it the 80s drums, big synth chord, chorus, electric guitar treatment that it got, and it turns into something else. You could have made Last Train Home a straight ahead rock song. You could have left it as an acoustic thing. We've seen this with Daughters. Look at Daughters on the JM Trio record versus Daughters on Heavier Things. Two very different treatments. Listen to the Daughters demo, another very different treatment. So you can do a lot with the song. Which is really cool. So that's where I think Blake Slatkin comes in. Is he's going to come in and take the core JM. They're going to be great songs. They're going to be great lyrics. There's going to be great guitar playing, but it's all the other stuff. How is he going to use the other elements that can be added to a song in a way that is interesting? And now this comes back to the Spotify number 1 thing that John Mayer mentions on his paddle. On that paddle, he says, I want to be number 1 on Spotify. Now, John Mayer is 47 years old. He is not at a point in his career where I would say, he's relevant, certainly, because he is involved in so many other things and so many other artists' music. But he's becoming more of that elder statesman type thing. So here's the thing, though. He scored a hit with New Light, kind of unexpectedly. Now, that was, I think, as he would probably tell you, unexpected. I mean, it did really, really well. And it was released as a single. It gained a lot of traction, and people loved it. I think, of course, if he could have another number one song, who wouldn't want that? You've seen this, though. You see this with artists who have kind of like their golden era, and then they come back with just one more just banger hit. And I don't think Mayer is quite to the age yet where it's like, he's been kind of doing his own thing, and then it's time for a revival song. But if you look at like Eric Clapton, for example, Tears in Heaven, it was in the early 90s, so he wasn't totally into that yet. But when you get into like Change the World with Babyface at the end of the 90s, that was kind of like the Clapton revival song. It alerted a lot of young people to who Eric Clapton was, and I was one of them. I think I might have learned. I was aware of Layla and Eric Clapton and Sunshine of Your Love and Crossroads and all that type stuff. But what really, really cemented Clapton in my mind as like, oh wow, this guy is like, he's relevant and I should listen to him, is Change the World from, I think it was a John Travolta movie. You look at Aerosmith with I Don't Want to Miss a Thing from the Armageddon soundtrack. They had already achieved iconic status, but then they came back for one more. So again, I don't think we're at that point with John yet. But I think it would be really cool if, working with someone like Blake Slatkin allowed him to then catapult into the charts in a meaningful way again. And I'm sure he would love that as well. But it's also not necessary. And I would assume that it's probably not really his goal. His goal is to make an honest and good record that he's proud of and that people who have supported him for a long time are going to enjoy, I would think. So it's cool, though. We could be totally wrong. Blake may not have anything to do with this record. Or maybe he has something to do with a song or, a couple songs. That's something that could be kind of cool. Multiple producers on the same record. I hope this episode ages well. Because if it doesn't, it's going to be a fail. But it's fun either way. But if we're right, this is going to be, we're going to have to put something, we're going to put on merch, or we're going to have to put it as the tagline of the show, breaking, news over here. So I'm curious to think, what do you think about this? Did you see this story that he posted? Did you notice the paddles? Now, I will tell you, I saw the story. I kind of scrolled by it. I saw the paddles, and something way in the back of my mind was like, you should screenshot that and take a closer look just to see, out of curiosity, what it is. I did not think it would contain any meaningful information until my good buddy Miles said, hey, did you see this? And I was like, oh my gosh, look at this. We have a detective on our hands. So interesting to think about what this could mean. I think there's something to it. Maybe they were working on somebody else's song. But again, the paddles reference John's new record. So do with that what you will. Now we are entering the after dinner mint, and this is going to be another faster after dinner mint. I'm going to take a sip of this coffee. It's an Americano, if you're wondering. And also, if you're wondering what the After Dinner Mint is, this is the portion of the show where we just hang out, we talk, and I don't worry so much about a structure or format as to how the algorithm is going to treat this or your attention span. So some of you might be leaving the show right now, but that's okay. That's okay. Those of you who are staying, I appreciate it, because watching or listening to this all the way to the end is one of the greatest ways to support the show. Speaking of supporting the show, this is what this After Dinner Mint is going to be about. Obviously, we talk about ways to monetarily support the show. I greatly appreciate the super thanks or joining as a member, all those things. Buying merch really, really helps. I will, and I don't make a request, of that. But what I will say is, if you feel moved to do so, I feel like the John Mayer Reddit could use a little bit more of Everything Mayor. It's one thing when I post it there, because I think people, it's gotten good reactions, but at the same time, like when it's me posting it, if people realize I'm the host, it's kind of like, oh, look at you self-promoting, and in self-promoting is never effective, particularly in a Reddit where people are very quick to call you out about those types of things. If you feel so inclined, any episode, doesn't have to be this episode, anything we talk about, if you're like, you know what, that was really good and I think other John Mayer fans should hear this, post a link to the show in the John Mayer Reddit. That is my request. But only if you honestly, truly feel like that's what you want to do and you could stand behind that post, or you can reference something specific in the episode that you found interesting. Certainly, don't do it if you think it's kind of a snooze episode and you don't like it. So, but that's my ask. That's my request of you. I don't make many requests of you as listeners to this show, but that is my request, because I think that would help to get this on people's radar, because we are prepping for the inevitable release of the 9th John Mayer studio album and all of the promotion and hopefully tour that will follow from there. That is it for this show. I hope we're right. I'm excited of the prospect, or for the prospect of a new style producer coming in, to see what John is going to do with that. And as we talked about, he is inevitably driving that bus, and a producer is kind of along for the ride, in my opinion, because Mayer comes fully formed with these songs. But maybe it'll be different this time. I don't know. I don't know how Blake Slatkin works, and we also don't know if he's really going to be the producer or not. Your guess is as good as mine, and until next time, see you on the next one.